welcome to Model's Approach to Unified Endpoint Management. This is a maturity model overview. Today we're going to be reviewing Security Level 3, Endpoint Security Level 3. And we come to you today from my home studio here, so a little bit of different background. So we will go through a very brief round of introductions. We'll talk about what Unified Endpoint Management means. We'll review the maturity model holistically with the phases and the categories in it, and then we'll talk specifically about the Security Level 3 overview, so we'll dive into that. Model Technology Solutions. So we are experts in endpoint management, security, and automation. We have 3 different service lines: as a project, as a service, and as IP. We are focused in our areas of expertise, and we are a Microsoft Gold partner. So how we engage with our clients, starting in the bottom right with the dark green, the consulting team, or as a project team, we identify, design, build, and deploy projects and solutions. The as a service team, moving left to the bottom left, we take the deployment, we will operationalize, upgrade, monitor, and automate solutions. And then our as IP team, we've got some custom development tools that we've created to optimize and innovate on top of the Microsoft stack. So let's talk a little bit about what Unified Endpoint Management means. So in a standard definition, endpoint management is a platform for management of devices such as phones and tablets, etc. At Model, we look at it just a little bit differently, and we take that same approach and we add to it well-defined processes that adapt to your organization's security needs, application needs, all to enable productivity and reduce potential security risks. So the UEM maturity model. So we developed an unified endpoint maturity model phases. This is nothing new. These have been around for quite some time. We just adapted them to the unified endpoint strategy. So beginning with the initial phase, starting to recognize, for an example, a need for enterprise endpoint management. Into the repeatable phase, maybe you're early in tool adoption. Many of the features are not yet implemented, and you need some standardization around processes to really further enable the benefits of the tool set. Maybe you're in a defined state where you've got an established central management tool that you use. There are some gaps in the management, some features that are not necessarily implemented yet. And it potentially takes a significant amount of administrative investment needed to collect to manage the tools. And so this is what we're going to spend some time today focusing on in the security realm. We'll talk about the defined state for security. Moving into the managed phase, you've got the single platform for all your endpoints. You're applying configuration as an example, pre and post provisioning. And processes are still require maybe a lot of administrative effort and load to execute. And maybe you're still lacking some analytics to help drive those strategic decisions in the business. And finally, in the efficient phase, in our example, you've got the unified endpoint management platform. You apply your configuration. You've got processes that are well defined, and it makes administration life easy. And you've got detailed analytics to help guide your decision-making processes. So we took those phases and we applied categories on top of them. The categories that we see are pertinent to the endpoint management strategy. So things like management infrastructure, configuration management, updates and servicing, application management, and endpoint security. So we're going to spend today on endpoint security and really dive into level 3 from a high level of what that looks like. This video serves as a maturity model overview for a much more detailed offering that we have, which is to assess your management, config management, updates and servicing, application management, and endpoint security for those levels in your organization and create a findings and recommendations report that can help drive your organization forward in the endpoint management game. So let's talk a little bit about a high-level overview of endpoint security. So endpoint security components, so threat and vulnerability management, reducing attack surfaces, next generation protection, endpoint detection and response, and then automated investigation and remediation. So these are things that you've probably heard of that are kind of buzzing around in our space and have been for quite some time. And so in this, the underlying categories that we have there, threat and vulnerability management, reduced attack surface, and next generation protection. So we're going to spend some time on today. Now, this is really just the tip of the iceberg when it comes into security. There's a whole security architecture specifically from Microsoft around endpoints, cloud data, etc. And for the purposes of this particular video, we're just going to cover a high level of these next three. So regarding threat and vulnerability management, the ability to discover vulnerabilities and prioritize those risks based on your environment is an important step. So as an example here, I just pulled up a screenshot of a more mature environment when it's looking at Windows Defender for Endpoint in this case, but your ability to see what devices the software that has the vulnerability are installed on in a tab that is next to the discovered vulnerability, which is next to the security recommendations, all in an effort to make decisions quickly. So adding some intelligence around that threat and vulnerability management versus waiting for a scan to happen, waiting for the inventory to come back from that scan, and then taking action on who is missing that patch once they've realized they've missed that patch is a little bit of a different approach to threat and vulnerability management. Furthering the maturity of the endpoint security for level 3, reducing the attack surface that's possible. So hardening the potential risks that are based on an organization. For example, hardware-based isolation, so containerization of applications. Preventing unapproved applications, the zero trust model, through something like application control mechanisms. And using controlled folder access to provide really additional layers of security that allow only specific apps to allow specific data that you've allowed. This takes a whole lot of tool sets and processes to implement, but the end goal is to reduce the overall attack surface or potential impact to the organization by leveraging some of these tools if you're at this level of maturity in an organization. And then finally, we're just going to talk just very briefly about next generation protection. So behavior-based antivirus, cloud delivered protection, the BAFS protection, the block at first sight, and then potentially unwanted applications protection. What this all really boils down to is not just using file-based definition threats, right? So being able to account for things like memory-based threats or events or applications and processes and network connections, and blocking things out of the gate that you haven't even defined yet, such as malware that are browser-based using something like the potentially unwanted application protection that you get through something like Chromium or Edge. So the ability to step up the endpoint security game gets you at a level 3 security. Now again, there's a whole lot of different terminologies that were kind of put into place in this particular video. And the point of the video is not going to be to explain them all or to give you a deep dive of it. If you'd like that, go ahead and contact us. But for next steps, if you are looking for next steps in your organization, I would do the following. Ensure that you have a well-defined security strategy for your endpoints and cloud data. So the 5 steps that we mentioned here, that we covered 3 of them in a very high-level overview today, make sure that you have tools that are capable of executing those kinds of features. Next, identify where you're at currently and what gaps you have in your security. Take those gaps and put those into a prioritized list of remediations that you would execute on. And then ultimately what that does for you is determine your move forward strategy for endpoint security. If you'd like any help or assistance with this, the assessment out of our maturity model or roadmap findings will help you get to that state. It consists of 2 90-minute sessions, some paperwork where we do some discovery, and out of that you get a findings and recommendations report that's prioritized for your organization. The cost is about $3,000 for us to execute that. If you want to get a hold of us, I'll throw our contact info up on the last side, but I appreciate you watching this video and stay tuned for the next set.